The galaxy had been quiet for so long that many believed war was nothing more than an old story. Generations were born and died under a sky free of conflict. The stars shone gently, and planets traded freely, sending goods, ideas, and culture across the endless void. For 3,000 years, the Council of Species ruled together, keeping balance and harmony. On the surface of countless worlds, children played without fear. Schools taught history as if it were a distant myth. Soldiers were remembered in statues, not in flesh. Old weapons rested in museums, covered with dust. To most, the word war belonged to the past, something primitive, something too distant to ever return. But humanity was different. While other species embraced peace fully, humans never let go of caution. On Earth and in its colonies, they studied the past carefully. They kept records of battles, strategies, and survival. Even when the galaxy laughed at them for their endless simulations and war games, humans did not stop. They trained in hidden academies, built small fleets that were officially for defense, and kept traditions alive. To them, peace was precious, but peace without preparation was fragile. Daniel, a young historian on one of the outer colonies, often walked through the academy halls. The walls were lined with images of old wars, battles fought before the council was even formed. He loved the peace of his time, but he understood the lessons of the past. His teachers reminded him daily, the galaxy forgets, but humans remember. Nearby, Captain Myra oversaw the orbital fleet around the colony. The fleet was small, more ceremonial than practical, but her crews trained as if the galaxy might fall apart tomorrow. She often received messages from the council, politely asking why humans spent so much time preparing for conflicts that no longer existed. She always sent the same reply, because history has taught us that nothing lasts forever. Other species thought this strange. The gentle Solari found war distasteful and refused even to speak of it. The towering Dran believed peace had made them strong enough to survive anything without weapons. The graceful Oron said that to prepare for war was to invite it. Yet none of them questioned that humans were loyal allies, even if their ways seemed odd. For the most part, humans lived like everyone else. They traded, they explored, they built cities among the stars. They were warm companions, curious explorers, and bold scientists. But under it all lay a quiet watchfulness. It was not fear, nor hunger for conquest, but something harder to explain, a readiness, as if their hearts carried a memory of storms that others had forgotten. On one bright day in the council chamber, the leaders of the galaxy gathered. The hall was vast, filled with shimmering lights and voices speaking in many languages. Most of the talk was about trade, art, and new colonies. Yet when the human delegate, a calm man named Tamash, stood to speak, the tone shifted. He did not talk of trade or art. Instead, he reminded the council that the edge of known space was restless. He had reports of strange signals, of movements near uncharted systems. His words were careful, respectful, but the meaning was clear: peace was not unbreakable. The hall fell silent for a moment. Then laughter filled the chamber. One delegate waved a hand, saying, "Your people always imagine threats where none exist." Another added, "War is gone. Why waste your thoughts on shadows?" Tamash did not argue. He only bowed his head slightly, the hint of a smile on his lips. He knew the truth of his people. Humanity did not hope for war, but neither did they deny its return. Back on the colonies, life continued. Families farmed green fields under distant suns. Children studied the stories of explorers and inventors. Workers built ships not only for trade but for endurance. And in the evenings, when the skies turned dark, soldiers trained quietly, their movements precise and steady. 3,000 years of peace had shaped the galaxy into something beautiful. Bridges of trust spanned between species, and the idea of violence seemed impossible to most. Yet beneath that beauty, humans stood apart. They carried an old lesson deep in their bones: Storms always return. And though the stars were calm, though the winds of the galaxy seemed still, there was a weight in the air that only humanity could feel. Somewhere beyond the shining borders, something stirred. Something watched. The galaxy believed peace was eternal. Humanity did not. And because of that, when the first sparks of danger began to flicker in the dark, it would not be the other species who stood ready. It would be mankind. At first, the reports were small. A missing cargo ship here, a silent colony there. The Council dismissed them as errors in navigation, storms in deep space, or pirates chasing easy prey. After all, the galaxy had not known war for 3,000 years. To most leaders, the idea of a true threat was unthinkable. But to humans, the pattern was clear. On the colony of Arden, Captain Myra stood before her officers, watching the latest transmission flicker on the screen. A merchant convoy had vanished near the rim, leaving no distress signal. Their escorts, lightly armed vessels, had disappeared as well. "This is the third time this month," Myra said, her voice calm but firm. "Convoys do not simply vanish. Something is testing us." Her second officer, a young man named Paul, frowned. "The council says it is nothing. They think it is pirates." Myra shook her head. "Pirates take goods. They leave survivors. They do not erase entire fleets without a trace." She looked around the table at her crew. "We may not have the power to chase shadows, but we must prepare. If this is more than piracy, the galaxy will not be ready." Far across the stars, in the shining council chamber, the leaders of dozens of species gathered again. This time, Tamash, the human delegate, brought evidence. He showed recordings of wreckage found drifting in space, the hulls of ships torn apart by weapons unknown to the council. He displayed star charts marking the growing line of disappearances. "Something is coming," Tamash said firmly, his voice steady but carrying a weight that filled the chamber. "And it is moving closer to our worlds." The council stirred uneasily. The Solari whispered that it was impossible, war was gone, buried in history. The Dran thumped their chests and claimed their natural strength would endure anything. The Orons shook their heads and argued that speaking of war only invited fear. One elder, her voice soft but tired, asked, "And what would you have us do, human? Raise fleets again after 3,000 years? Teach our children to fight instead of sing? You are asking us to return to the darkness we left behind." Tamash did not flinch. "I ask you to remember that peace exists only because it is protected. If you will not prepare, humanity will. But do not call us alarmists when the storm arrives." Laughter rose again, though it was weaker than before. Some of the delegates avoided his gaze. For the first time, unease touched the chamber, like a cold breeze blowing across a warm hall. Back on Arden, Myra's fleet drilled harder. Her crews worked day and night, running scenarios, simulating ambushes, and testing defenses. Some complained in whispers that it was pointless, but Myra reminded them that history never forgave those who waited until danger was at their doors. Meanwhile, far from the busy colonies, on the edge of charted space, a lone science vessel named Horizon drifted among strange signals. Its commander, a quiet woman named Liane, studied the readings. She saw patterns of energy too precise to be natural. Her crew recorded faint transmissions, sharp and alien, cutting through the void. Then, without warning, the stars around Horizon lit up with fire. Unknown ships emerged, black and angular, moving with dreadful precision. Before Liane could send a full warning, the vessel shook under their weapons. Her last words, transmitted across the stars, were not of fear but of duty. "They are here." The signal reached humanity first. Myra listened in silence, her jaw set. Horizon's coordinates were close to the missing convoys, and now there was no doubt. This was no storm. This was no pirate. It was an enemy returning from the darkness of forgotten time. When the news reached the council, shock filled the chamber. Delegates shouted, argued, and accused one another of lies. Some claimed the humans had staged the attack to prove their point. Others begged for calm, insisting that a single lost ship meant nothing. But Tomasz spoke once more, his voice carrying through the noise, "You can deny it, or you can face it. War has returned. You may not be ready, but humanity is." Across the colonies, humans received the news with grim silence. Families gathered around screens, watching the fragments of Horizon's last transmission. Soldiers checked their gear. Engineers fueled ships that had been waiting for centuries. Children who had grown up with stories of war now saw those stories take shape before their eyes. And still, a strange thing happened. Where other species trembled, humans stood straighter. They did not smile with joy, but with something harder to describe, an understanding that the time they had prepared for had finally arrived. The first sparks had been lit. The galaxy might not see it yet, but humanity did. Somewhere beyond the stars, an old enemy had risen again. And when the fires spread, it would not be the peaceful council that stood first. It would be mankind, ready to meet the storm. The Horizon's destruction spread fear across the council worlds. For the first time in centuries, people locked their doors at night and looked up at the stars with unease. Markets grew quiet, trade slowed, and whispers spread through every colony. The council tried to calm the citizens, but rumors of strange ships in the dark could not be silenced. In private, the council argued. Delegates accused each other of weakness, of exaggeration, or of hiding the truth. But one question always returned to the center of their debates: why were the humans so calm? On Arden, Captain Myra continued to train her fleet. Her crews had seen the same recording of Horizon's final moments that the council had, yet instead of despair, they worked harder. Officers gave orders with steady voices, engineers fueled ships without hesitation, and pilots drilled with a determination that seemed unshakable. Other species noticed this difference. A Solari trader, pale and anxious, spoke to a human dockworker. "How can you work so calmly when death is coming?" The dockworker, a broad-shouldered man named John, only shrugged. "Because fear does nothing. We prepare. That is how we survive." The trader did not understand. Most species had no memory of real war. They had lived too long in peace, their instincts softened by centuries of safety. To them, the human response was unnatural. Some even began to whisper that perhaps humanity had brought this new danger into the galaxy, that they had called it with their endless talk of storms and shadows. In the council chamber, Tomasz faced these accusations directly. One delegate pointed a clawed hand at him and shouted, "It is too perfect. For centuries you have spoken of war's return, and now war comes. Did humanity summon it? Did you keep this enemy hidden until you could rise as saviors?" The chamber filled with noise. Some delegates demanded answers, others called for silence. Tomasz stood calmly until the voices lowered. Then he spoke. "If you believe humanity is your enemy, then you are blind. We have trained because we remember. We prepare because peace is fragile. The storm has returned not because of us, but because time always brings change. We do not welcome it, but we are ready for it." His words echoed across the hall. Many delegates looked away, ashamed, but others still doubted. Fear made them suspicious, and humanity's calmness seemed like proof of secrets. Meanwhile, on the colony of Arden, Daniel, the young historian, stood before a group of students. They had gathered to hear him speak, hoping to understand why humans reacted differently from the rest of the galaxy. He showed them images of Earth's past wars fought on land, sea, and sky. He spoke of struggles against hunger, storms, and disasters. "Our people were shaped by hardship," Daniel said. "We did not seek it, but it found us. And so we learned. We learned to endure, to fight when we must, and to stand again after every fall. Peace is precious to us, but it is never permanent. A student raised her hand. But why do other species not see this truth? Daniel paused before answering. Because they were lucky. They were given 3,000 years to forget. They grew in peace, and they believed it was eternal. But humanity carries memory in its bones. We never forget. His words spread quickly. Soon, recordings of his lecture reached other colonies and even other species. Some mocked him, but others felt a quiet unease. If humans truly remembered storms that others had forgotten, perhaps their calmness was not arrogance, it was wisdom. That night, Myra stood on the observation deck of her flagship, looking out at the stars. Paul, her second officer, joined her. "They don't trust us," he said softly. "The council thinks we are hiding something." Myra did not turn. Her eyes stayed fixed on the darkness beyond. "They fear us because we do not fear what they do. But when the enemy arrives, fear will not save them. They will turn to us then." Paul was silent for a moment. Then he asked, "And when they do?" Myra finally looked at him, her expression calm, almost cold. "We will stand, because that is what humans do. Whether they trust us or not, we will fight. Not because we want to, but because it is necessary." In the deep void beyond the rim, the enemy moved again. Another colony went silent, this time belonging to the Dran. Their mighty warriors, once so confident, found themselves helpless against an enemy that struck from the stars with fire. When news of the loss reached the council, panic surged again. The Dran demanded vengeance but had no ships to deliver it. Only humanity answered with action. Fleets were already mobilizing, supplies were already gathered, soldiers were already standing in formation. While others argued, humans prepared. And across the galaxy, whispers changed. No longer were they simply strange allies who dreamed of war. Now they were something more. Something dangerous. Something necessary. The question remained in every mind: why were humans smiling when the rest of the galaxy trembled? For weeks, the galaxy held its breath. The horizon's destruction had shaken the council, and the fall of the Dran colony spread fear like wildfire. Still, many leaders clung to the belief that the threat was small, something that would burn out on its own. They hoped the darkness at the rim would not spread further. But hope was not enough. On a cold night above Arden, alarms rang across Myra's fleet. Strange signals filled the sensors, stronger and clearer than before. Black shapes emerged from the void, massive ships unlike anything recorded in council history. They moved with eerie silence, their dark hulls swallowing the starlight. Myra stood on the command deck, her hands gripping the railing as the first images came through. "There they are," she whispered. "The enemy has shown its face." Her officers worked quickly, voices steady but tight with tension. Paul leaned over the console, reading the scans. "Energy output is far beyond anything we've seen. Their armor is dense, layered. And their weapons," he hesitated. "They're not council design. These ships belong to no living species we know." Myra nodded. "Then they belong to the dead." Reports soon confirmed it. Old records matched fragments of the enemy's design. These ships belonged to the X-Or, an ancient empire thought destroyed thousands of years ago. Their return explained the disappearances, the silence, the sudden storm rising at the edge of known space. When the council received the first clear images, silence fell over the chamber. The Solari trembled, the Orons lowered their eyes, and even the mighty Dran could not hide their unease. "It is impossible," one delegate whispered. "The X-Or were erased in the Age of Fire. How can they return?" Tomash stood tall, his voice cutting through the fear. "They were not erased. They were waiting. And now they rise again. If we do nothing, they will take every world, one by one." But the council only argued. Some wanted to flee, others wanted to negotiate. Some still believed it was a trick. Their voices clashed, louder and louder, while time slipped away. Meanwhile, on Arden, Myra had no patience for debate. Her fleet faced the first wave of the Xor near a mining outpost. The human ships were outnumbered, their weapons weaker, their hulls thinner. To most species, this would have been suicide. But Myra did not order retreat. "Signal all ships," she commanded. "Form the crescent line. We will not run." Her officers obeyed. Human ships moved into position, small but swift, their engines glowing like fireflies against the darkness. The Xor advanced in perfect silence, their formation flawless, their weapons charging. The first shots tore through the void. Xor beams cut across space, striking human shields and shaking the small vessels. Sparks flew inside the ships, alarms screamed, but the line held. Myra's voice came steady through the comms. "Hold formation. Let them come closer." Paul glanced at her in shock. "Closer? Their weapons will tear us apart." Myra's eyes were fixed on the screens. "Closer? They do not know us yet." The Xor pressed forward, confident in their strength. Then, at Myra's signal, the human ships broke formation, darting in all directions. They weaved between the enemy's fire, striking at weak points, feinting and retreating, forcing the Xor to divide their attention. What seemed like chaos was in fact precision, every move calculated. For the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy saw a true battle. And to their astonishment, the humans fought not with fear but with fierce energy. Reports of the clash reached the council within hours. Delegates listened in disbelief as recordings played, human ships laughing in the face of danger, pilots calling out maneuvers with excitement instead of terror, officers rallying their crews with calm determination. "They are smiling," a Solari delegate whispered. "How can they smile while facing such death?" Tomash answered without hesitation. "Because they are human. And this is what they have prepared for." The battle did not end in victory. The humans could not destroy the Xor fleet, not yet. But they held the line. They slowed the enemy. And for the first time in centuries, a council fleet, though unprepared, was able to arrive and retreat safely because humans bought them the time. The message was clear. The Xor were back, stronger than ever. But humanity would not run. On the observation deck after the clash, Myra stood beside her weary officers. Her ship was damaged, her crew exhausted, but their spirits were high. They had faced the ancient enemy and survived. Paul spoke softly. "They will come again. In greater numbers." Myra nodded. "Yes. And so will we." She looked out at the stars, her eyes steady, her voice calm. "The galaxy will learn what humanity has always known. Peace is a gift. But war is a test. And we are ready." The enemy had been revealed, and the storm had begun. The council chamber was filled with noise. Delegates shouted across the hall, demanding answers, demanding safety, demanding someone else take responsibility. The enemy had a name now, the Xor, and that name spread fear wherever it was spoken. Whole colonies begged the council for protection, but the fleets were too small, too untrained, too slow. Amid the chaos, Tomash stood tall. "The Xor cannot be stopped by words. They must be met in battle. Humanity has already faced them. We will face them again. But we cannot do it alone. If you wish to survive, you must stand with us." Some delegates agreed at last, though their voices shook. Others remained silent, still unwilling to believe. But the first step had been taken. Small groups of ships were promised, though their captains looked uncertain. The galaxy was beginning to move, pulled forward by the determination of one species. Far from the council, Captain Myra prepared her fleet. Her ships had been repaired after the first encounter, though scars still marked their hulls. Crews worked without complaint, their faces tired but resolute. Myra walked through the hangar, her gaze meeting the eyes of every pilot and engineer she passed. She did not give long speeches. She only said, "The X-OR are coming. We hold the line." Paul approached her with a data pad. "Scouts report a large X-OR fleet moving toward Arden. If they reach the colony, it will burn." Myra's jaw tightened. "Then we meet them before they reach it." The human fleet set out, engines glowing against the endless dark. Beside them, a handful of ships from other species followed. Their captains were nervous, their crews untested, but they came because they had seen what humans could do. They hoped to learn. They hoped to survive. The enemy appeared first as shadows, then as towering shapes, filling the void with their presence. The X-OR ships glided forward, cold and relentless, their weapons already glowing with terrible light. Against them, the human fleet looked small, fragile, outnumbered 3-1. On Myra's command deck, tension gripped the air. Paul stood ready at her side. "Orders, Captain." Myra's eyes never left the screen. "We strike first." Her voice carried through the comms to every ship. "Do not wait for them. Show them who we are. Strike hard. Strike fast. And remember, you are human." The first volley came from the humans. Missiles streaked across the darkness, weaving through X-OR fire. Energy blasts followed, lighting the void in brilliant flashes. The X-OR answered with thunder, their beams ripping into shields, shaking entire ships. One human vessel, the Sparrow, was struck head-on. Flames burst across its hull, alarms screamed, and its captain's voice came through the comms, "We're hit, but we're not done yet." With engines failing, the Sparrow rammed its weapons into the side of a X-OR cruiser, firing until the last moment. The explosion tore both ships apart, lighting the void with fire. Across the fleet, cheers rose even as tears filled eyes. Humanity had taken its first victory in this battle, small but powerful. Myra gave her next order quickly. "Break formation. Hit them from all sides. Make them chase shadows." The humans moved like dancers, fast and unpredictable. Their smaller ships slipped between the massive X-OR vessels, striking weak points, vanishing before counterattacks landed. Confused, the X-OR spread out, their perfect formation shattered. The Allied ships tried to follow, stumbling at first, unused to such chaos. But human officers guided them, calling out maneuvers, teaching through action. For the first time, Dran warriors, Solari pilots, and Oran gunners fought side by side with humanity, not in neat lines, but in flowing, living motion. Paul's voice rang out over the comms. "They're breaking. We can push them back." Myra remained steady. "Hold. Do not chase too far. We are here to protect Arden, not to be drawn away." The battle raged for hours. Hulls cracked, shields fell, but the line did not break. At last, the X-OR began to withdraw, pulling their remaining ships back into the dark. They had not been defeated completely, but they had been stopped. For the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy had stood against a true enemy and endured. On Myra's flagship, the crew erupted in cheers. Paul smiled for the first time in days. "We did it, Captain. We held them." Myra allowed herself a small nod. "Yes. But this is only the beginning." News of the victory spread quickly. Across the galaxy, species who had once laughed at humanity now spoke their name with respect. Children repeated stories of the Sparrow's sacrifice. Soldiers trained harder, inspired by the sight of humans smiling in battle. In the council chamber, Tomash stood once more. "You see now what can be done," he said firmly. "The X-OR can be fought. The line can be held. But only if we stand together. Humanity has shown the way. Will you follow?" No one laughed this time. The first clash was over. The galaxy was changing. And humanity, smiling through the fire, was leading the charge. The galaxy had changed. News of the first clash traveled faster than any fleet could move. Humans had stood against the Xor and survived. Other species, once hesitant and fearful, began to follow their example. Slowly, the Council fleets, previously unsure and disorganized, started moving with purpose. On Arden, Captain Myra watched her screens as reports came in. Allied ships, inspired by the human tactics, were starting to coordinate. Where confusion had ruled before, now there was structure. Human officers guided the Dran, the Solari, and the Orons, teaching them how to move, when to strike, and how to survive in battle. Paul leaned over her shoulder. They're adapting faster than expected. Even the Dran are following human commands without complaint. Myra nodded. They see what works. And they see that we do not fear them. Fear slows fleets. Courage guides them. Across the galaxy, humans were becoming teachers as well as fighters. On distant colonies, instructors trained Allied crews in strategy, simulation, and precision. Ships moved like living beings, weaving through enemy fire with efficiency and skill. Humans had discovered something that peace had hidden for centuries: war was not only about strength, but about intelligence, timing, and trust. The Xor, meanwhile, continued their assault, believing the galaxy was weak. They struck with force and precision, confident in their advantage. But each time they met a human-led fleet, they were surprised. Humans did not panic. Humans did not retreat. They adjusted, countered, and forced the Xor to react. Slowly, the balance was shifting. On the Council worlds, panic gave way to hope. Tomash addressed the assembly once more. Look at what is happening. Humans have shown that preparation, courage, and unity can change the tide. If we follow them, we can turn fear into victory. Some delegates nodded, others still hesitated, but for the first time, many could see the truth: humanity's readiness was the galaxy's greatest weapon. On the battlefield, Myra's fleet faced another wave of Xor ships near the colony of ZerathPrime. The humans had learned from the first clash. They set traps, lured enemies into narrow asteroid fields, and used small, fast ships to flank the enemy while the larger vessels provided cover. Paul watched in amazement. It's working. They can't move as freely. Myra smiled slightly. They are clever, but not human clever. Watch and learn. The Xor, frustrated by the sudden resistance, attempted to break the line. Their massive cruisers fired relentlessly, but human ships moved with precision, dodging and striking in perfect coordination. Allied species followed their lead, gaining confidence with each maneuver. In one daring move, a squadron of human ships led a feint, drawing a group of Xor vessels into an asteroid field. Trapped, the enemy ships could not maneuver, and human and allied fire tore through them. Explosions lit the field, and the remaining Xor retreated with damaged hulls. On the observation deck, Myra turned to Paul. Every victory counts. Not just for today, but for tomorrow. Each lesson the galaxy learns now will save lives later. Paul nodded, watching the glowing explosions fade into space. They're learning to fight like us. The Dran, the Solari, even the Orons, they're changing. Yes, Myra said quietly. The galaxy is remembering what it forgot. Peace is good, but preparation is better. Even the civilians felt the change. On Arden, markets reopened, but children gathered in schools to hear stories of human courage. Citizens volunteered to help with supplies, to repair ships, and to support the fleets. Where fear had once ruled, determination now grew. Humanity had shown that the Xor were not unstoppable, and the galaxy began to believe in itself again. Meanwhile, the Xor commanders convened on their massive flagship. They had underestimated humans, expecting fear and retreat. Instead, they faced organized resistance, strategy, and relentless courage. Their attacks slowed, their fleet suffered losses, and the confidence of millennia began to crack. Back in the council chamber, Tamash's words echoed. The tide is turning because humans do not fear. They do not despair. They act. Let us learn from them, and we will survive. On the battlefield, humans and their allies pressed forward, pushing the Xor back. Each small victory inspired the next. Ships repaired quickly, tactics improved, and morale soared. The galaxy remembered what it had once forgotten: survival required courage, intelligence, and unity. Myra looked at her fleet, her face calm but proud. The enemy is strong, but they are not invincible. Today we showed the galaxy what it means to fight with purpose. Tomorrow, we will show them what it means to win. The turning tide had begun. Humanity was leading not just with weapons, but with wisdom. The Xor were no longer invincible, and the galaxy, guided by human courage, was learning to fight again. The galaxy was no longer the quiet place it had been. Stars burned with new light as battles raged, fleets moved with precision, and the shadow of the Xor slowly receded. For the first time in millennia, the species of the Council felt the sting of fear and the warmth of hope. Captain Myra stood on the deck of her flagship, overlooking a field of stars filled with ships. The human fleet was not alone. Dran warriors, Solari pilots, Oran gunners, and countless others followed their lead. The galaxy had learned to move as one, guided by humanity's courage and example. Paul approached her, excitement and exhaustion both in his eyes. The Xor are retreating. Their forces are broken. Myra nodded, her expression calm but proud. Yes. They underestimated us, underestimated the galaxy. They did not expect us to fight together, to learn so quickly. But they were wrong. Across the colonies, celebrations were quiet but meaningful. People did not cheer blindly. They repaired, trained, and helped one another. Children listened to stories of human tactics and bravery, and for the first time, even the most peaceful species understood the value of readiness. Humanity had not only fought, they had taught. In the council chamber, Tamash addressed the assembly once more. The Xor have returned, but so has humanity's example. Peace will return after this storm, and the galaxy will be stronger for it. We fought, and we learned. We survived because we did not fear. And that is why we smile. Some delegates finally understood. They realized that humans had not rejoiced in war, but in preparation, in unity, in the strength of knowledge and courage. Humans smiled not because they loved conflict, but because they knew the galaxy could survive it. On Arden, Myra's fleet returned from the final engagement. Ships bore scars of battle, crews were tired, and yet there was a quiet joy in the air. Soldiers helped one another repair damage, engineers shared techniques, and pilots laughed softly at narrow escapes that had once seemed impossible. Paul watched a young human pilot carry a damaged drone back to the repair bay. They are happy, he said. Even after everything. Myra smiled faintly. Yes. Because they know what we always knew. Survival is not about hiding from storms. It is about standing in them, learning, and growing stronger. That is the human way. Across the galaxy, allied species began to mirror this attitude. Dran warriors trained with renewed discipline. Solari engineers refined their technology with human guidance. Oran navigators learned new strategies for fleet movements. Humanity had ignited something deeper than courage. They had shown others how to endure, how to fight smartly, and how to believe in themselves. Even the Xor, as they retreated into the unknown, would remember this lesson. They had faced not just weapons, but intellect, cooperation, and unwavering courage. Humanity had turned the tide, not through sheer strength alone, but by inspiring the galaxy to rise with them. In the quiet moments, Myra looked at the stars and thought of all the colonies she had protected. She thought of the lives saved, the fleets guided, and the courage she had witnessed. She understood why humans could smile in the midst of battle they had prepared, they had endured, and they had won not just for themselves, but for everyone. Paul joined her silently. "Do you think it will stay this way?" he asked. Myra's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Peace is never permanent. But the galaxy is ready. We have reminded it what it means to survive, what it means to fight together. We smile because we know we are strong, and because we know we will stand again if needed." The council chamber echoed with agreement. The leaders of many species realized that humanity's lesson would last far longer than any single battle. Preparation, courage, and unity were gifts that peace alone could never teach. And in the far reaches of space, humans continued to watch, train, and prepare not because they sought war, but because they respected the lessons it taught. The galaxy had survived the first wave of the X-War. Humanity had led the way. That night, across countless colonies, human families looked up at the stars. Some told stories of the first clash, others remembered the sacrifices, and all knew the truth. Humanity had smiled through the storm because they were ready. The X-Or had returned, but the galaxy had survived. And humans, always prepared, had reminded everyone why they endured. They smiled because they were ready. They smiled because they had shown the galaxy how to stand together. They smiled because, after 3,000 years of peace, humanity had proven that courage, intelligence, and determination were stronger than fear. And for the first time in millennia, the stars seemed brighter, not because of the light alone, but because the galaxy had remembered how to hope.